Hello, welcome to HLA Live. HLA Live is our regular broadcast on the HLA YouTube channel as well as all the other social media channels. Each week we talk to interesting people from across the HLA community.
Good evening, everyone. I am really excited to be chairing tonight's meeting.
Hi, I'm Rosie Spooner and I'm hosting HLA Live this Wednesday.
And I'm an HLA scholar and I'm also going to be your host this evening.
To share with us their ideas and their innovations and hopefully bring them to a global audience.
Quite quick, we have ideas, let's do this, let's do that. So
many of the topics come from our community, with scholars and faculty expressing an interest in many of the discussions that we're about to have.
Hello everyone and welcome to the HLA Live session on widening participation in the postgraduate realm.
Homelessness and health.
Addiction and the new normal.
HLA programs are built on 6 pillars. The leader is an innovator and entrepreneur. The leader is a communicator. The leader is a manager. The leader as a negotiator. The leader as a follower. And the leader as a philosopher. If you are interested in becoming a HLA scholar, why not get in contact? Many of the episodes in HLA Live will cover one or more of these important pillars. The HLA team consists of Pedra, Eamon, Tim, Riddy, Alistair, Adil and Trisha, and a range of other HLA scholars and faculty. Episode 44 of HLA Live is entitled Mentoring and is hosted by our Head of Mentoring, Dr. Dina Saleh.
Hello everyone, and thanks so much for tuning in to HLA Live session on mentoring today. My name's Dina. I am currently an internal medical trainee at Imperial. I'm hoping to pursue a career in oncology, and I have a personal interest in mentoring because I am the lead for the mentoring at the Healthcare Leadership Academy, which is a program that I created a couple of years ago. I've got a really impressive panel with me, so I will introduce everyone by turn, and then hopefully everyone can say hello. So first up, we've got Dr. Ruth Oshikanlu. She is a nationally recognised expert nurse, midwife and health visitor with over 26-year track record in delivering secondary and primary healthcare services in the statutory and voluntary services. She is the CEO of Goldmine Limited, which is a coaching consultancy that helps individuals improve their performance at work through employee engagement. She's also lots of other things. So she's an author, speaker, mentor, coach. She has received a huge number of awards and she's a regular columnist. So, I mean, I could go on forever, but Ruth, I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit more.
So I'm Ruth Oshikanlu. As you said, I'm a nurse, I'm a midwife, I'm a health visitor. I'm also a mentor and a coach, so most of what I'll be sharing, I've had to do it, looking for a mentor, finding one, keeping one, maintaining the relationship. I also wanted to talk a bit about peer mentoring. So, because we often think we have to go to someone quite senior, but actually our peers are quite knowledgeable and skilled. So I set up several years ago a community of practice where after leaving the NHS, I felt a bit isolated and I thought, how can I mentor others but still gain from that relationship? So I got like-minded colleagues. Do you want to join a community of practice? We could mentor each other, we could share expertise, we could set goals. And it's been going for about 7-8 years, 2013 I set it up. So once a year we'll meet in January, pre-COVID, set our goals for the year. We also have a WhatsApp group and we'll hold each other to account and celebrate our successes as we grow.
Next up, we've got Dr. Arish Yasai, who is an academic paediatric specialty registrar in London, and he's also the lead of HLA Think. He also works for a medtech company specialising in digital biomarkers and remote patient monitoring. He's regularly involved in high-profile national policy, including the 7-day NHS programme, the junior doctor contract negotiations, and the National Child Obesity Strategy, and just generally a very impressive person. So thank you, Arash, for joining us.
I think it's not really an overstatement for me that mentoring completely changed my career trajectory. I've taken quite an unusual path. I've done lots of different unusual things. And when you have interests where there isn't really a clear pathway or you've got to kind of forage your own way, I think that's really particularly where mentoring comes in its own. I actually found, Ruth, lots of things that you said, completely agree with them. And the thing that I actually would really emphasize is actually the importance of peer mentoring. Because actually, I know it is really challenging to go and approach people. And I've done it sometimes, and you're right, it's important to be able to give something back to that relationship. And sometimes it's difficult to frame that correctly. But actually, peer mentors, I think, are a massively underrated resource. I think if most people went around their peer network and asked who's doing really interesting things that I'd like to do, you can probably find a lot of people who could give you some really practical advice. And sometimes the thing that I found is people who are close to where you are in your career stage actually can give you lots more practical advice, lots of granular operational advice around, don't just say things like, oh, be active, achieve your dream, etc. But actually, this is the steps that I took to achieve X, Y, Z, and this is why I got involved in this, that, and the other. And what I've seen has completely transformed that over the last few years is actually lots of, networks. So you mentioned your community of practice. I think things like the HLA actually are a really good example of where you get like-minded people, not just giving them something, but actually giving them a network to share. And I think what HLA really emphasizes more than anything is actually peer mentors can be so impressive. And actually, lots of the people I've really learnt from, lots of the people I've got really good advice from, people who've opened up doors for me have been at my stage, in some cases more junior. That's really, if I was going to give one takeaway from all of this, actually, it's not about getting the most senior person who knows all the most people, can open their address book for you. Obviously, that is so useful if you're fortunate enough to have that. But actually, the practical step of finding out who amongst your peers is doing really interesting stuff and just chatting to them about how they did it and what they learned and would they recommend it. I found that more so now than ever, especially with emerging things like digital health. That's the really valuable advice where you can get it.
I mean, I completely agree, and that's one of, I think, when I tell people to join the HLA, that is the main reason. I always say it's the opportunity that you get from meeting these like-minded people, and genuinely, I completely agree. You learn so much from people from all stages, no matter how senior or junior that they might be. So finally, but definitely not least, we've got Rachel Palmer, who is a newly registered nurse working in haematology in Devon. She's also the HLA Nurse and Ally Healthcare Professional Network Lead, having been part of the 2019-20 Bristol cohort. And she's also, excitingly, I did see on Twitter, Florence Nightingale Foundation Leadership Scholar, so congratulations.
Thank you. Yes, no, that's come back recently this year, so that's my sort of next exciting project, and which we also have a sort of peer mentoring program that's sort of grown organically, really. A sort of the WhatsApp group, Ruth, that you were talking about, I think has been immensely useful for us as scholars who would have normally met in person, but now can sort of keep in touch over WhatsApp and keep each other accountable. And I also really resonated with a lot of what you said in terms of being a student nurse, and you're sort of thrust into these mentoring relationships really unorganically, 2 or 3 times a year, that you have to sort of grow over sort of 8 to 12 weeks, and then you leave them again. And then suddenly when you qualify, you are expected to then mentor students and you were a student 5 minutes ago, and I think that's something that's been a bit of a challenge for me this year, is sort of that automatic adjustment in role. And we've had some lovely students on our unit, and one before Christmas asked me, "So Rachel, what do you want to do?" And I thought, "Oh, what do you mean, what do I want to do? I've just qualified and I'm doing it." And it was the first time I'd actually sort of sat back and thought, wow, up until then I'd had a plan of what I needed to do to get to each different stage, and although it didn't work out at each stage, I'd crossed the finish line as far as my brain was concerned. And also I'm still very early on in my career, but I'm sort of at that early stage now where I'm thinking, what are the goals, and is there an end goal, and who do I need to seek out to help me reach them? And I think that's quite an exciting time, and maybe not what people think of when they think of mentoring. They think in terms of nursing, I think they think of that sort of prescribed relationship between nurses and students. So yeah, it's an exciting time.
Arish, do you think that the mentors that you've had, are they people that you've kind of sought out individually, that you know what your goal is and you've gone out to kind of find a mentor to achieve that goal? Or have you actually, been lucky enough whilst in your career to kind of have mentors provided for you from, just from being a doctor point of view?
I think it's a little bit of both. The thing I realised, there are opportunities available to everyone to seek those mentors. It's actually a case of what you do with that conversation. Actually, if you go back to think about the people you connect with and interact and engage with, it's that whole idea that you've got to work out what it is you want to bring to that relationship. How do you want that relationship to change? And I can see Ruth nodding, so I'm thinking like we've got some consensus here, but that's my genuine impression of it. And some of these cases have genuinely been quite literally bumping into someone at a conference, or it's been you're doing something that you're interested in and someone will come talk to you and they'll then express an interest, and then you can take that conversation and be like, actually, this could be a good opportunity here. In some cases, it's someone who is doing something really similar to kind of what you want to do. And I think that's particularly important if you're taking a slightly unusual career path or a quite niche interest, because I think that's that aspect of the relationship which you can then, provide, which is, eagerness, passion, willingness to learn. The final thing really is actually, for me, it's about trying to think about not just different areas of mentorship in terms of the areas you want to go. So the different sort of, let's say you want to do your clinical stuff, one of your non-clinical interests, if you've got a business interest. For me as well, I do find it useful having multiple different mentors at different stages if that's possible. And I think those individuals can occupy different types, give you different types of advice. I think I gave a talk to this HLA actually now quite a long time ago, but the way I described it, I kind of described it as kind of senior mentors, junior mentors and peer mentors. And those senior mentors are people actually who you're probably going to struggle to get a huge amount of time and access, and may not be able to give you advice that's super useful, because when they entered that profession it was 20 years ago and now it's super competitive and there's all these additional things you've got to do. But they can give you some really helpful reflections, like looking back about, okay, these are the general things across all the things I've done that are and aren't useful, and they may be able to open some doors. And then there's the kind of junior mentors who can give you a bit of a kind of a 5-10 year sort of heads up about the stuff coming through and say, actually, I did these things and I really would suggest you don't do those things because that didn't work out so well for me. And it might be relevant to you because you're kind of not too far away. And then, yeah, the thing that we've mentioned quite a lot in this is those peer mentors, the people who said, actually, I never thought about this at all. Do you want to come along and work on this with me and we can see how it goes? And actually this whole area that I hadn't been involved until 6 months ago, this is how I did it. Yeah, let's have a coffee. Let's talk about if you're interested in the sort of things that I did to get ready. Is when you go to conferences and meetings and things, it's not just about the speaker and learning from the speaker or even going to speak to that person. You've actually got an entire room that shares your interest and is either at a similar career stage to you or maybe slightly ahead or, whatever. But actually there's a whole room of people who you've got some overlap and you can learn from, and it's about understanding that opportunity is there and how you're going to go to seek that out and to try and change those relationships from just one-off encounters to something a bit more fruitful.
I completely agree, and I think that's also why networking is so important. And even just the basics of things like medical Twitter, just things like Twitter and hashtags at conferences, that genuinely is how you end up kind of meeting people and finding people that have similar interests. I think also we always talk about the fact that it can be kind of challenging to look for a mentor, but actually I think we do forget that it's quite a compliment to be asked to be a mentor. You'd be quite flattered if someone came up to you and said, what you're doing is really interesting, can I learn? So I think that's something to kind of bear in mind to those people who are perhaps a bit worried about reaching out. I mean, what is the worst that someone can say to you other than that they don't have the commitment, which is completely fair enough.
I think, yeah, that's completely right. The worst they'll say is no, but actually from my experience, what I've also found is often they'll say, I may not be the right person, but actually I know someone who is.
Ruth, you've mentioned reverse mentoring earlier, and I think that really goes in with everything that we've been saying about peer mentoring and just in general, the way that we're going with kind of, like the flat hierarchy. I don't know if you can talk a bit more about it and explain it to, you have explained it a little bit to our audience that, how have you had any experience yourself with it? And
Yeah, I have experienced it as a mentee as well as a mentor. And reverse mentoring is just where senior executives, people quite senior in an organization, mentor people who are quite new to the organization or quite junior within the organization. And it's actually to learn from the mentee more than the mentor giving expertise, because what young people, newer people to the organization see is are the problems that often executives may not see. One of the things I focus or support people with is their motivation. And when new entrants coming, they may not have the expertise, but they always have the motivation, the enthusiasm. And if they're not careful, before long, they lose that enthusiasm as they settle. So you want to tap into that when somebody knows, actually, this could work better. You could, employ more digital approaches, the culture of the organization or the department may change. They have this insight that executives may not necessarily have, but they don't always have the patience to learn this. So if you don't grab them whilst they're still enthusiastic, they often would leave, because they'll realize, this is great, but it's not for me, and then they leave. So that's the beauty of reverse mentoring, where you match somebody quite senior to someone quite junior, but it's a symbiotic relationship. So as the executive is giving their expertise from their experience, this new entrant, as it were, not necessarily a younger person, but just someone new to the organization, too, has expertise of how the service could improve. And so that's where the learning happens. And there has to be commitment both sides. The mentee also needs to know what they're bringing, so that they can offer to the senior executive, because often people know what they want, but they're not necessarily willing to give their expertise or recognize that they have that expertise too. I love, when I work clinically, I love students because they bring a breath of fresh air. They ask, why are you doing what you're doing? And I'm having to think, because sometimes you're on autopilot. Actually, why am I doing what I'm doing? And the minute you explain, sometimes this suggests ways you could improve. And how come I've not thought of that? So all of a sudden, I've got expertise. So, and this is why I say never be shy to reach out, because you're bringing something to this relationship too. You're going to get, but you're also going to give. And so perhaps if someone's looking for a mentor, focus on what do you want, what do you have to offer, what you bring in, how committed are you to this relationship, because that's when you benefit the most. But also hold the senior executive accountable. I'm committed to this, you need to be committed to this too, because I've also seen when it doesn't go well, where people just say, oh, I'll enter into reverse mentoring, and they're not committed, they're so busy, they don't make time for it, and then the relationship breaks down. So yeah, that's what I love about reverse mentoring, because it just opens my eyes to things I've never thought of. What planet have I been on? Why haven't I thought of doing it this way? Because it's much easier. I can see the rationale behind the suggestions, and just improves efficiency.
I think I can speak for everyone when I say that we have all been mentees and mentors, kind of both ways. And I know that sometimes it can be really difficult. I don't know if you guys have any tips for what you think makes a good mentorship work. What do you think both parties have to bring to the table?
Yeah, I mean, listening to you, Ruth, talk about reverse mentoring sort of made me really happy, because what brought to mind was about retention. And there's a really high attrition rate, sadly, in nursing in particular. And I think we might see it across the NHS in general, given the last year that we've had. But that sort of recognition of more junior members of staff and what they can offer and what they can bring, and being recognised for their motivation and for their ideas, I think is really crucial. But likewise, it is like you said, a symbiotic relationship. You need to both make the time. I've had mentors in the past that like what you were saying, Arash, are really high up and really senior in post, and they are fulfilling their sort of role as a mentor, but it's not very sort of dynamic, or you sort of get this allotted meeting time, and it's like, okay, how far are you along in this? Okay, this is what I think about what you're doing. This is what you could be doing next. Okay, bye.
I think you've emphasised a really important thing there, which is that the basis of a mentorship has to be a relationship, and you have to have that kind of chemistry, and you have to have a, you have to have a friendship really to be able to actually be vulnerable enough to learn from someone. I don't know, what do you think, Arish?
About whether or not you can have a honest conversation, and that works two ways. So I think if I'm a mentee, I think it's important to be able to have the honest conversation where you say, I don't know, or it's extremely level, I literally have no idea what you're talking about. You're going to have to help me through this or explain this. I don't even know where to begin. Whereas, if you don't do that, then actually the advice you're given may not be helpful for whatever reason. And you also need to be honest enough to say actually what you do and don't want from the relationship. I'll come to that in a second. And on the second side of it, it's the mentor side. I think personally, to be a good mentor, you need to be able to have a relationship where you feel able to say no, or you disagree to that person in a constructive way. But actually, it wouldn't be a mentoring relationship if you just said yes and facilitate everything. That there will be times where you say, I don't, given what you've told me and your goals, etc., I really don't think that's a good idea. I won't be annoyed if you do it, but I have to tell you, I don't necessarily think that's a good idea, and this is perhaps what I would suggest instead. And there's different ways about doing it, so you're not prescriptive. There's a whole thing around, helping people work through their goals, allowing people to pursue things they really want to do, rather than actually doing what you want to do and kind of living vicariously through them. But at the fundamental of it, I think if you can't be in a position to say no, or you disagree, or to signpost people the other way, I don't think that relationship is ever really going to be at its potential. I think the most important thing from both sides is a clear understanding of what it is you want out of the relationship. And I guess actually from the mentee, to a certain extent, that's more important, because you want to know what it is you want to get out of it. And I think early in my career, it was often this idea that just if you have a close connection or relationship with a senior person, that's it, you're sorted, doors will open for you, no problem. But actually, that's obviously not going to work, because they can only do so much, and you've then got to have similar conversations with other people. So I guess the question that you need to ask is, what is it that you want from that relationship? I've had recently, through the various cohorts I've mentored for the HLA, the ones with the relationship has been really, really fruitful, and it's actually put me in a position where I start thinking a bit more kind of creatively around how we can help that person, is when they quite honestly outline what kind of things they want to learn. And even if that's I don't know, but I know broadly speaking, these are the things I'd like to do. I'd like to try something in this. And the challenge I'm having is I don't know how to do this. Can you help me? And that's a really easy, great formula, because then that allows your mentor to then think, okay, I know how to do that, or I've had various ways of doing that. We can try a few things. Have you considered X, Y, Z? You mentioned this stuff and you said you were interested in this, but actually, have you considered this whole other area that I don't know too much about, but I can signpost you to some people who may be able to know? Once you have that sort of conversation, you can only really have that conversation with that relationship. That's where I think it's the best you can get, because whereas on the other hand, a supervisor, almost to a certain extent, is just providing assurance that you're doing things to a certain standard, and doesn't necessarily go the same way of identifying necessarily new opportunities, etc. for you. I think to unlock that whole level of mentoring, really it's about honesty.
And I guess the good thing about kind of specifying your needs and goals is that you then are kind of accountable to them, and that kind of further adds to the whole mentoring process, is that you're motivated to achieve these goals, and you are going to have to achieve them, otherwise you'll feel like you'll let someone down. And I think actually that's what loads of studies have shown. It's one of the reasons why mentoring works so well, and why the people that do have mentors, perform better, because things like being held accountable to your goals works well.
I suppose, in addition to that, is also to have some structure around the mentoring relationship. So you discuss your goals, but how often would you meet? What does success look like? How would we measure it? Know what you're going to be discussing, and prepare, plan, give feedback, regularly review one's progress. but also know that some mentoring relationships come to a natural end. There's nothing worse than trying to flog this dead horse, so where it's okay, whatever you started could come to a natural end, and it's healthy, because I think sometimes you grow out of your mentor, and it's okay. This is where I was last year. I'm no longer here. I've got everything I want from that relationship, and it's healthy to move on. And that's okay. And both the mentor and the mentee should be able to naturally arrive and at that place and say, look, I've really enjoyed it, but I need something more to grow. But when it works so well. A mentor could be a catalyst to one's progress, to one's success. And it's so rewarding. You give and you get. And I would also say, if you're going to receive mentoring, be a mentor too, because we're always wanting to get what you're giving back. So I love when I'm a mentee within a relationship, but also be mentored by someone else, because then you get to see what it feels like to be on the receiving end. As a mentee, one has to be committed to expanding their capabilities, developing, focusing on achieving their goals, looking for those results, and celebrating one's milestones wherever, whatever progress, keep celebrating it. One has to be clear, what do you want from this? What are the goals? How would I know, I'm succeeding? One has to be willing to receive feedback. Some feedback is great, some feedback's not so great, but then those become areas for development. And just be responsible, be accountable, immerse yourself in it. You wouldn't know unless you give it a good go.
Ruth, I'd be really interested to know that transition you described. As you correctly say, you can't continue indefinitely. There's going to be a point where what you've got isn't going to be there anymore. And in my mind, the peer mentor role is quite a good opportunity to retain that relationship, but recognize that you've both moved on. What's your thoughts on that? For me, I tend to, if I've achieved a goal and I think actually you've enabled me to achieve this. So often one may be on a program and then the program comes to an end. Sometimes I'll extend that relationship, and sometimes I'll say, look, you know what? All the goals you set, you've met them. I actually don't know how I could help you succeed further. So we have that frank conversation, and yes, we'll remain friends. It's almost like a graduate. You finish a period of education, you graduate, and you move on and find someone else, because now you set new goals, and then you just keep so I love to, and sometimes I get frustrated because there's no movement, because I just feel that person's moved as far as I can take them. So sometimes I'll ask, so what do you think? So we now revisit the relationship. What do you think about this relationship? How have you grown? And then we have that frank conversation that, do you still need me? Because I love being there when people need me, but they don't want me. And then I get them to the point where they want me, but they don't need me, because you don't need me anymore. Time to fly. Yeah. So
I think something interesting that you guys have mentioned, which I've not really thought about before, although I realize I've done, is looking for different mentors. So I think if I think back, I realized that I actually do have different mentors for different things, but I don't think I actively went about trying to do that personally. I think I thought a bit traditionally in that, like it's great to have like a particular mentor or something.
Yeah, I have several mentors I'm working on for different things. So clinically, I have a mentor. Business-wise, I have a business mentor. Public speaking-wise, I have a mentor. People that, so articulate, so eloquent, that could just command the stage. And I'm like, oh, Lord, people scare me. So I have a mentor for different things. And I manage all those relationships, but the focus for each relationship is different and the goals are different. So yeah, and we meet differently as well. Sometimes I will pay for mentorship as well, because it's specific. I know what I want. I know what I'm going to get. You have something I want. So I will pay for a period of mentorship, because actually it will get me to where I need to be. So I remember when I wanted to digitalize my products, COVID came. I would love to do one-to-ones, but it's not going to be feasible. I didn't have the skills, so I went to somebody who's an expert in doing it. And if I paid for them to do it, it would be more expensive. So they mentored me, setting me goals periodically. This is so easy, but I had to do the work, and I had to report on the work I'm doing. And as I saw progress, it was easier. So, sometimes I just think, if we don't get it, it's out there, and it's an investment in you. So now I have skills I can use, and I've got the return on investment. If I'm speaking, there was a time I had to speak to an audience of 500, and I'm like, Lord, there's no point if I get on stage and pass out. So I need to pay for somebody who would support me to do it. And a lot of it was breath work, things I hadn't even considered. And so I got what I want, and I used it. It was over a period of 6 sessions. They did some coaching. Because they were an expert, I still call it mentoring, because they had the expertise. So once you know what you want, it's out there. You could contact HR, contact your professional organizations, because often they'll have a network. There's a lot of mentoring offered through even ethnic minority networks that work. So it's knowing where you can find a mentor, but honestly think out of the box and just ask. The worst they'll say, as Arash said, is no. I often say, how can I make that a no, that no a yes? So often when someone says no, I say, I hear not yet. Okay, how can I make it? And again, as Arash said, if you don't ask, you don't get. So it may not be them, but can they suggest somebody? And I often don't say, can you suggest a few people? That opens my options. So rather than suggesting one person, they'll suggest 2 or 3, and then my work now is to ask the others. And each one I'm asking, can they suggest? So before you do the work, and you would eventually get a mentor out of asking.
Rachel, earlier you mentioned that one of the difficult things that you thought was that you've kind of suddenly become kind of thrusted into the position of a mentor when you've just kind of finished being a student. And I think that's something, the kind of general themes of teaching, leadership, mentoring, these are things that in these healthcare professional roles that we do, you're expected to somehow learn them along the way, and then suddenly become them and to act with those skills. So do you have any tips for people that are worried about things like this?
Gosh, well, I mean, I'm sort of living it at this moment. I think sort of hearing from what you both were just saying about choosing mentors for different things, I think energy brings energy. So, if you have a student, or you might be looking for a mentor, and a potential mentee comes to you with their goals, you suddenly think, oh, okay, this person is really interested. This person actually is really keen, and then I think that sort of hopefully breathes energy in the potential mentor. And then I think the onus is then on the mentor to sort of take that and run with it. And I think then it becomes that sort of relationship. I think a tip would be, if you are sort of newly qualified in your role, is to sort of put in the work yourself. So reflect back on mentors that you've had as a student, and take what was good and maybe not so good, and think, okay, who do I want to be like, and who do I not want to be like, and what made them a really good mentor for me. And it may not be something, might not be their knowledge or their skill or their expertise. Certainly, especially now with having students, that student could be allocated to another nurse who is 10 years down the line in my specialty and has a lot more knowledge, skills and expertise. But I think we had a conversation earlier about, I think those, hopefully the newly qualified staff and professionals have that more recent knowledge of what it was like to be a student and what it was like to be training. And that's maybe what that what that student needs, or what that professional needs. It might not be the clinical knowledge at that point.
If everyone can just summarize your take-home messages for what you would want someone to know if you were, 10 years ago back in your shoes.
Well, I say ask for help. A lot of the times we know what we want, but we don't always know how to get it. But if you don't share that with anyone, you would never know. So ask for help. I believe in lifelong learning. I'm always saying I'm never there. I'm work in progress, and all my life I'm going to continue to be work in progress. But I know the value of mentorship. I know I have grown because I have been mentored, but I've also grown because I've mentored others. So I suppose the take home for me is, ask for the help and the support you need. If you find yourself as a new mentor, you were just thrown into that position, just ask for help. Build it into your appraisal and work with that person. As has been stressed, is all about that relationship. Imagine that person and that journey with them, so you're both growing together in that relationship. You have to want to help people grow, develop. And so, be a mentor and get a mentor is what I'll say.
Amazing. Rachel?
I mean, 10 years ago I was 11, but
maybe a bit older.
I think my take-home message was exactly like Ruth was saying: be a mentor and have a mentor. So I think being in both of those roles, put in the work to that relationship and set your goals both as a mentee. What do you want from that relationship? And also as a mentor, how do you see this? How do you see this going? And what do you want from it? Do you want to grow as a professional? What skills do you want to develop? Because especially if you're early on in your career, or you've been pushed into that relationship, use it as an opportunity. Because actually, I think it's a privilege to be a mentor, and you can learn a lot from the person that you're mentoring, but also about the process and about yourself as well. So take the opportunity.
So firstly, I completely agree with what's just been said, and actually the example that I have is that lots of the people who I've in some cases both mentored and menteed, we're now, I would consider ourselves to be kind of collaborative sort of partnerships. So that I would definitely echo both the things that I've just said. I suppose my take home from 10 years ago would be the idea of, you don't just have to look up, you can look around you. It's not just about picking the senior person who is absolutely flying in his or her field and is doing all the things right and is there where you want to be. It's the people around you who share your interests and might be doing that little interesting thing that you would find out about and learn about if you took the time to ask them, and then ask them how they got involved, and then ask them what they did that worked. And that often is going to be a lot more helpful than someone who's done some, I'm sure, impressive things, but their challenges will have been very different for the ones that you'll go through. And actually where they end up now may look very different from what a ideal or a great, professional life looks like for you in 20, 30, 40 years time. So yeah, my thing would be to tell my younger self, don't just always go for, the head of the department. Ask around the people who are doing really interesting things, because actually peer mentorship, like I said at the beginning, genuinely massively underrated.
Completely agree and echo everything that you've said. I think something else that I would also add is, we mentioned a lot earlier about kind of being honest and having an honest relationship. And I think something that's really useful in mentoring is to not just learn from the successes, but to learn from the failures as well. And I think that's something that's really important that I personally know that I've taken on board. But thank you all so much for joining me today. It's been really interesting. I think we can all agree that mentoring is like a secret weapon that we all need to use. And I think a big theme that everyone agrees on is, be a mentor and mentor as well. So thank you all for joining me, and I hope everyone has enjoyed it.
Thank you to everyone that made tonight's episode possible. Whenever our scholars are thinking about complex problems facing our health systems, we encourage them to think about how they make significant change in the world of healthcare. We are incredibly lucky to have some incredible scholars in the HLA. They use the HLA as a platform to take their ideas and bring them to fruition. If you are interested in the work of the HLA, why not join us at one of our future HLA events? Why not join one of our programs? Why not even become a HLA scholar? Thank you for joining us. My name is Johan Marlwana, the Director of the HLA, and it's a good night from all of us.